Just recently, at a rally in Pennsylvania, U.S. President Donald Trump stunned everyone by announcing a massive hike in tariffs on steel imports, doubling them from 25% to 50%.
Donald Trump has told a rally at a U.S. steel plant in Pennsylvania that he intends to double U.S. steel import tariffs to 50%.
Not only steel, but aluminum imports will also face the same 50% tariff starting June 4th. This move came as Trump celebrated a new deal with Japan's Nippon Steel to invest heavily in U.S. steel production. His message was clear: foreign steel and aluminum won't enter the U.S. cheaply anymore. Trump declared, "Nobody's going to get around that, no one will be able to avoid it." But this aggressive tariff increase has sent shockwaves, especially in Canada, one of the world's top producers of steel and aluminum. The U.S. is their biggest buyer, making this tariff hike a serious blow. Canada reacted strongly. Prime Minister Carney's team called the 50% tariff a direct attack on Canadian workers and industries, especially in provinces like Alberta, where factory workers and engineers are deeply impacted. The tariffs hit a steel and aluminum trade worth over $35 billion annually between the two countries. Doubling the tariff could make much of that trade unprofitable, threatening a long-standing, if fragile, economic partnership. Why is Canada so upset? For decades, Canada has been a reliable supplier of steel and aluminum to the U.S. But these new tariffs put Canada at a huge disadvantage, especially after years of lobbying to reduce such trade barriers. The move is seen as a heavy blow to friendly trade relations. Trump's justification seems to be that if Canada earns too much from this trade, they should pay the price. But from Canada's perspective, it looks like an unfair punishment. And now Canada has a powerful card to play: its massive oil exports to the U.S. The $103 billion oil trump card. Canada is the world's fourth largest crude oil producer, exporting about 4 million barrels a day to the U.S., worth roughly $103 billion annually. Many American refineries, particularly in the Midwest and West Coast, depend heavily on Canadian heavy crude oil, a resource that's not easily replaceable. Alternatives like Middle Eastern or Venezuelan heavy crude face political risks or sanctions. Prime Minister Carney has hinted at using this oil leverage before, threatening to cut or redirect oil exports as a form of retaliation against the tariffs. Now, with tensions rising, Canada might finally consider turning off the oil tap to the U.S., or at least imposing quotas or additional taxes on these exports. What would cutting Canadian oil mean for the U.S.? Such a move could seriously disrupt U.S. supply chains. Without Canadian oil, American refineries would face shortages, pushing them to buy more expensive crude from riskier sources. Gasoline prices at the pump could spike by as much as 30 to 40 cents per gallon, hitting consumers hard. The chemical and petrochemical industries could also suffer supply shortages, worsening the U.S. trade balance and causing political headaches for the Trump administration, especially with elections approaching. But is Canada ready to cut off oil? It's not an easy choice for Canada. Right now, about 90% of Canadian oil exports flow directly to the United States, making the U.S. by far its largest and most reliable customer. Cutting off or even significantly restricting this market would deal a serious blow to Canadian revenues and could destabilize parts of its economy, especially in Alberta, where the oil industry is a major employer. Many experts warn that a sudden halt could trigger job losses and economic hardship in that region. That said, Canada has been actively working to reduce its dependency on the U.S. market. Pipeline projects like the Trans Mountain expansion are designed to increase export capacity and enable more oil to be shipped to Asian markets, including China and India. This shift is part of a long-term strategy to diversify Canada's trade partners and reduce vulnerability to U.S. policy changes. Last year, Canada exported roughly 200,000 barrels per day to Asia, a dramatic rise from almost nothing 5 years ago. This growth signals progress, but the Asian market still can't fully replace the nearly 4 million barrels per day that currently go to the U.S. Exporting to Asia also involves additional costs, longer shipping times, and complex logistics, making a rapid pivot difficult. Furthermore, Canada needs to renegotiate contracts and scale up infrastructure before it can rely on these new markets completely. What's next in this trade showdown? Canada's threat to restrict oil exports has already shaken Washington, even if it's partly a strategic bluff. Some analysts argue that cutting oil would be too damaging for Canada's own economy, risking high unemployment and political fallout. Others believe Canada might take a middle path, limiting exports or hiking export taxes to pressure the U.S. into reconsidering tariffs. Meanwhile, on the U.S. side, Trump's decision to double steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% threatens significant costs for American manufacturers, potentially driving up prices for consumers and fueling voter dissatisfaction. The situation could escalate further, with tariffs rising to 80% or 100%, or Canada retaliating more aggressively. Could a diplomatic solution save the day? Amid rising tensions, rumors have surfaced about a potential diplomatic summit between U.S. and Canadian leaders, sparking cautious optimism that a path to de-escalation might still be possible. Such a meeting could provide a critical platform for dialogue, allowing both sides to air grievances and seek compromises before the dispute spirals further out of control. However, the reality on the ground remains challenging. President Trump has maintained a firm stance, framing the tariffs as a win-or-lose issue that he is unwilling to soften. This uncompromising rhetoric signals that the U.S. government views the tariffs not just as a trade measure, but as a strategic tool in broader economic and geopolitical negotiations. On the Canadian side, the government has made it clear that it will no longer extend the benefit of the doubt to the U.S. After years of efforts to maintain friendly trade relations, Canada is now prepared to take a tougher line to protect its own economic interests and workers. If neither side is willing to budge, the consequences could be severe. Industries on both sides of the border may face serious disruptions, from steel mills and aluminum plants to oil refineries and manufacturing hubs. Higher costs for raw materials and energy would likely trickle down to consumers, resulting in more expensive goods and rising prices at the gas pump. Ultimately, the broader economic fallout could weaken growth, increase unemployment, and strain political relations across North America. What does this mean for you? For everyday Americans, the impact of these tariffs and potential oil supply restrictions could become very real and personal. Steel and aluminum products, from cars to construction materials, may become more expensive as manufacturers grapple with higher import costs. And if Canada decides to restrict oil exports, gasoline prices could surge, making driving and heating more costly for families nationwide. Canadian workers and businesses are facing a parallel uncertainty. The looming threat of trade barriers and retaliatory measures puts jobs at risk, especially in industries like steel production, aluminum manufacturing, and oil extraction that are integral to the country's economy. This economic uncertainty can shake consumer confidence and investment, potentially slowing Canada's growth. Beyond the immediate effects, this standoff underscores a broader, more critical lesson. Depending heavily on a single trading partner is a risky strategy in today's volatile global economy. Canada's active efforts to diversify exports by expanding access to Asian markets reflect an awareness of this vulnerability. By developing new trade relationships, Canada aims to reduce its exposure to sudden policy shifts and build a more resilient economic future. In short, while this trade conflict plays out on a grand geopolitical stage, its effects will ripple down to everyday lives, shaping prices, jobs, and economic security on both sides of the border. Final thoughts. As this tense standoff continues, the future of U.S.-Canada trade relations remains uncertain. Will Trump back down? Will Canada follow through on its oil threat? Or will a last-minute deal restore calm? What's your take on this escalating trade war? Do you think either side will blink first? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our latest updates on this and other major stories. Thanks for watching.